Hello, my name is Gil Penalosa, and this is Cities for Everyone, the webinar. Every other Tuesday, I invite fascinating people from around the world to share experiences and knowledge that will help us create affordable, equitable, and sustainable cities. I was born in Bogota, Colombia, where as commissioner I led the design and construction of over 200 parks and took a small program called Ciclovia, Open Streets, and increased it to over 120 kilometers, 75 miles of car-free streets every Sunday and holiday, where more than 1 million people walk, bike, run, shop, enjoying the presence of each other. 17 years ago, I created 880 Cities, a non-profit organization based in Toronto, Canada, where I live. Last year, I ran for mayor and came second with 100,000 votes. My aim was to change the conversation in creating a Toronto for everyone. I've been fortunate to have worked in over 350 cities in all continents, sharing and learning. Based on all experiences, I developed master classes and keynotes customized to each city. But Cities for Everyone, the webinar, is a way of giving back. It's always free and hopefully always interesting. Please invite others to join us every other Tuesday, anyone who cares about cities and people, equity and sustainability, about all living older, healthier, and happier. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome. My name is Gil Penalosa, and this is the bi-weekly webinar series, Cities for Everyone. Today, we have a very important topic. BRT, Bus Rapid Transit, is fascinating, and we have a guest that is an expert. He's Dario Hidalgo, who was the executive director of the Bogota's BRT system, and then has been advising cities in multiple places. Talking about public transit is critical because the reality is that there is no city in the world, medium size or larger, that has solved the issue of mobility through the private car. None. And everyone has tried. So if it was possible, there would be hundreds of examples because everyone has tried. And sometimes people have a negative perception of buses because they say it's an old system or a new one or whatever. And people say BRT system, what is it? Some cities buy 2 or 3 new buses and they say, oh, we're doing a BRT. Obviously, that's not a bus rapid transit. So Dario Hidalgo, also a university professor, is going to explain what's a real BRT. He's going to show examples and what are the benefits and also what might be the negatives. Dario, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gil. And currently I'm a professor and trying to take all the experience I got around the world and trying to transfer it to the new generations at Universidad, Javeriana, an important university here in Colombia. But I did have the opportunity to work in many places of the world, particularly Bogota, but also in other cities in Latin America, in Asia, and in Africa. And I find BRT as part of the toolbox that city mayors, planners have to improve mobility and access in the city. So the first is knowing what it is. This is a definition that was made by the Transportation Research Board. It was a document by the Transit Cooperative Research Program in the US. And I like it because it shows the flexibility. Bus rapid transit, BRT, is something that has vehicles, has service, has running ways, have information technologies, all these things into an integrated system with a strong identity. And the picture you have here is from in the metropolitan area of Toronto in York. And it's one of the most interesting systems in Canada and in the whole North America. So this is a definition. So when you have this definition that is so broad, you need some particularities to have it more clear. A full BRT, and this is also North America, but Guadalajara has all these things. A segregated busway, it's a very important feature of the BRT. buses that are adequate to the capacity and the need of the system, stations. In most of the high capacity systems, you pay before boarding the buses, not in the bus, to reduce the dwell time, the time that the bus is at the station. Uh, Centralized control, that's very, very important to optimize the operation, and a distinctive image. When you have all these elements together, you have a full BRT, but you have a lot of flexibility to apply these concepts to a different corridors in different parts of the world. Currently, there are 187 cities moving more than 30 million passengers every day, more than 5,000, almost 6,000 kilometers of BRT, and is mostly concentrated in Latin America, where the systems started in the city of Curitiba. And we have examples in Asia, particularly in China, and in Australia. There are very important systems in Australia, but there's also systems in Europe and the US, which are part of the fabric of the cities and the integrated systems we need. And actually, this was not part of mobility 25, 30 years ago. There were few bus corridors, one in France, then one in Lima, then Curitiba in southern Brazil, but there are very few systems as such in different parts of the world. And as with any technology, there was a slow and long time where the technology was not adopted by many cities. And suddenly, after the city of Bogota, Mayor Enrique Peñalosa put together the system in Bogota, many people got interested in this as part of mobility. And there was a fast adoption, very, very fast adoption starting in 2001 up to 2014. And then there was a decline, not a decline, still several cities are adopting BRT, but not as fast as they did in the first decade of this millennium. And when I see this picture, I see something very similar that happened in the previous change of the century, and was the adoption of trams. The adoptions of trams got exactly the same shape. Very few cities at the beginning in 1881, and then suddenly in a decade later, many cities adopted trams, and then fewer cities, and then it started to be phased out for different reasons in different cities because of technological obsolescence and other things, and they started to phase out. But then trams, very recently, with a lot of promotion from the industry, the technology was got a rebirth as a medium capacity alternative with many environmental advantages, effectiveness, efficiency, economy, and equity. Books were written about light rail transit in Europe, and the word light rail transit, LRT, was coined as the modern tram. And in the US, it got captured also in Canada, the idea that trams were the European way of doing transit. And even the Europeans believe this is the most important way of doing transit in the European cities. And actually, it's not the only way. It's a very important and really good that the cities may have this fixed route type of transit, but it's not the only way to go around. And even in Europe, they found an alternative to light rail. They call it differently to BRT. They call buses of high level of service with the acronym BHLS. It's unfortunate because the four-letter acronyms, people don't remember them. It's easier to remember a three-letter acronym, but it's the European way of doing buses better. And I do believe that the concepts behind BHLS are very strong and very applicable in many contexts. The definition by Finn and Hidebaut and others that were the ones that put together an important report in Europe some years ago, but it's still very relevant. They talk about an urban transport system which has a bus, but has new conditions to provide better performance. The internal characteristics of the offer, the busways and the bus and the technological elements that support these BHLS, the integration into the rest of the transportation network is not a solution on itself, it's integrated to the rest of the system, and it's also integrated into the urban area. These concepts were applied in many cities in Europe in the form of BHLS, and you see that at the end, the concept of BHLS is a very close cousin of the North American BRT, because the world BRT was coined in the US, not and then applied in many places of the world for systems that were already in place. Curitiba, Bogota were already in place when the term BRT came to massive use. But when you see Europe, the busway in Nantes, you see running ways, you see stations, you see vehicles, you see ITS and operation management tools, and a strong identity. So the BHLS is a very strong cousin, it's a very close cousin to BRT, but it's a very adaptive and is focusing on performance and integration, which are two very good elements. And the report by Finn and all and other reports have considered BRT innovative concepts that can be a part of the transportation system and also the backbone of public transport in medium and small cities. Probably big cities need heavy rail, but BRT and BHLS can be part of the overall transportation system, and in some cities will be the backbone of the system. So there are many reports. Here are some of the ones that I pick up over these 25 years that I have been working on the topic. And the characteristics that are behind these many studies that are in these reports and in others is better access to low-income communities, reductions in emissions, land value increases, which is a very important concept on how to improve cities, is to increase the land, the value of the land. If you protect for gentrification, it's okay, but many reports show that BRT can also increase land values and improve road safety, which is also a critical element in our cities. So there's a very strong literature supporting BRT and BHLS. There are issues in implementation, there are debates and discussions, but it's part of the toolbox. When we see the difficulties are always on this, not on the technology itself, but on institutions, on finances, but also the misperception that buses are low quality mode, which is wrong. Buses can be high quality if you design well, if you operate well, and if you provide the right characteristics of the system. And even that many reviews, some of them I have participated actively, show that there have been planning, implementation, and operational issues. All of these issues are solvable, are things that you can fix, not things that are impossible to face. So let's look a little bit about the examples in Europe. This is a list by Brendan Team, the author of the report that I just indicated. You see many cities, small and medium and large cities in England, in France, in Germany, in Ireland, in Italy, in the Netherlands, in Spain, in Sweden. They did case studies, and I bring some of the examples they have in the case studies. For instance, this one in Prague, in the Czech Republic. Very interesting. They are not afraid of combining buses with rail. This corridor in Prague has buses, but it's a light rail transit as well, and they combine services. The buses provide a flexibility because the buses can come from anywhere and enter the corridor and then go to anywhere without forcing the people to make transfers. So this example in Prague, it's very interesting in that regard. The Nantes example, it's a very interesting corridor, not that long, it's only 6.9 kilometers, and it's very high capacity and has a very good integration to the urban realm. I really like this project. In Paris, there is a peripheral route, a route that that goes around Paris, which is with buses that also help not getting the people in and out, because the buses come from other places, enter the busway, and continue at higher speed because they are away from traffic in Paris, which is a very, very excellent city with many things going on. There's another one in France, in Rouen. This one has guided buses that go really close to the station, so there is not a gap, and the guiding system works specifically at the stations, not all the way during the corridor. But the future of buses is automated buses. It's easier to automate a bus in a busway than automate a car in general traffic. So automation is coming also to these elements of BLHS and BRT. This one in Lorraine is very interesting because it doesn't have traffic lights and has a very special design. So the bus has priority without traffic lights, and it's faster for everybody in this place. In Hamburg, in Germany, you see also these elements, and you don't see this as such very special and spectacular design. It's actually simple. It's providing priority to the people that is going in the buses above the general traffic. Another example in Oberhausen, which has the combination of trams and buses. In Europe, they are not afraid of doing this combination. There's no reason not to do it. And this one, there is a guided bus. This was an invention of the 70s in Essen. It was also applied in Adelaide in Australia and in Cambridge in the UK, having a little wheel on the lateral side of the bus that guides the bus at high speed in a totally dedicated lane, which is also grassy with greenery, and provides very high capacity and very fast commute to the users of this super bus in Essen. There's also these buses in Brescia in Italy, which are also very, very interesting for the size of the city. And in Amsterdam, they had a really, really strong and connected network in Amsterdam that goes all the way from the airport to many places in the city, 41 kilometers in a major European city. And there are other examples in the Netherlands, which always are combined with bicycles, because that's the Netherlands. You don't do just buses or trams, you also do bicycles, this case in the Netherlands. And also in Lisbon, you see this in Spain with a guided trolley bus. You see in Gothenburg in Sweden, and also in Stockholm. And you also see in Zurich with this very, very, very large bus that was designed especially for a BHLS route in Zurich. And in the UK, you see this Thameside, which is a new development that was developed also with the BHLS in place, and also the guided system in Cambridge. So these are examples from Europe, and you see a lot of flexibility. When you see the comparison of the cost, euros per mile, compared to the trips per day, you see great variety. Systems that are very low cost, less than 1 million kilometer of route in Hamburg, in Stockholm, in Grenoble, in Prague, and systems that are on the high side of the cost for Europe, 7 million euros per route. But the trams, if they adopted trams in these corridors, it will be 3 to 5 times higher for the European standard. So in the case of Europe, they find also this alternative. Still, many mayors, many cities, many people prefer the trams to the buses, but they have the alternative. And in some cities, they have combined this alternative of buses of high level of services. But what about the US and Canada? In US and Canada, there are 15 cities in the US, and the largest of them is New York City, with the select bus services. Here in this series, Janet Sarikan, which was the person behind all the transformation with Mayor Bloomberg in New York City. And in Canada, you have many systems that are really high usage. You have Ottawa, you have Winnipeg, and others that are lower capacity. Total of 7 cities listed in this database of BRT data that is maintained by WRI in Brazil. So let's look at these examples. This is Albuquerque in New Mexico. It's a very interesting branding for it. It is called ART, A-R-T, which resonates very well. You have this one in Arlington, Virginia, in close to Washington, D.C. It's a small route, but it's a very interesting integration into this part of Washington, D.C. area. You have this Cleveland Health Line. It's called Healthline because there are many hospitals in the route. It's a very high capacity for U.S. standards. It's very nice system in Ohio. And a system that is older is Eugene, Oregon. You see also this grassy route. You don't need to pay all the busway. You only need to pay where the wheels of the bus go, and you have a very nice stations and shelters for Eugene, Oregon. It's a small city. There is another one in Fort Collins, Colorado, which uses the spare space along a rail track, but adapted very well for these buses that are called MAX. And a fast track in Hartford County in Connecticut. Also the busways and the buses and all the characteristics in a combined system that provides higher capacity. In Vegas, where you can find anything in Vegas, you can find also this BRT, which is a very, very well done system that even connects the mall with the older casinos, and it's not only used by locals, but also by many tourists in this city. In Los Angeles, in California, in LA, they introduced these routes, BRT routes, and it's actually an extended system for many corridors in LA, which has this adaptation of putting the bicycle in front of the bus, which is also a good way to combine long trips, combine your bike trip with a bus trip. You have this metro rail in Miami, also along a rail corridor. Some people in Miami says it doesn't work well and want to invest 10 times much in something that will do mostly the same that the metro rail is doing in Miami-Dade. A very, very extended system, very simple because it's just painted, red painted.
Hello, Dario, you just froze for a second. Hello, let's see if we get Dario back. Wow, this is very, very interesting. Dario, you are back. But you are muted. You
hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I was talking about New York City, the excellent elements of that Janet Sarikan and Mayor Bloomberg introduced, and they have been expanded with the next mayors of New York City. The buses carry a camera on front to ticket the vehicles that invade the painted lanes. You have this limo in Orlando where everything is magic. It's a very interesting, a small corridor, but adapted to the conditions of Orlando. An older system in the US is this one in Pittsburgh. It was one of the first implementations in Northern North America. It is a very high capacity and it's totally segregated. It doesn't cross with traffic. It's totally segregated, very similarly to a system in the transitway in Toronto. Also, this one in Richmond, Virginia, and this one in the city of San Bernardino. And the last of the list is San Francisco in California. This is one of the two corridors in San Francisco. This is the Van Ness corridor. And now they have Market Street, which combines electric buses with normal buses. So you see that North America has been adapting these conditions of BHLS from Europe and BRT from Latin America. And in Canada, you have 7 good examples that can be improved. Everything can be improved. The largest system is Ottawa, the Transitway, but you have this one in Calgary, Max. You have this one in Gatineau. I didn't find the demand numbers, probably because it's in French. I didn't find the figures. Probably someone in the audience can provide us with numbers for Gatineau, which has a very particular way of design. These systems in Canada are similar to the one in Adelaide in Australia. Probably the same group of people is designing them. They have these larger stations with good connections. This one is in Mississauga, and this one is in Toronto area, and in Quebec is a larger system. Actually, it has been expanded over the whole city, and probably this one in Winnipeg, which is very short but very high usage. Actually, the one in Winnipeg, and the audience can help us. It's buses that come from many places and then join and go in the busway. So it's very, very high usage, more than 166,000 passengers every day. And the one that I reported at the beginning of my talk, the one in York, which is very well done, and it's integrated to the development, fast, rapid development of this region in the metropolitan area of Toronto. So here comes the engineer and takes the numbers and make graphics. And you can see in red the Canadian BRTs, and in blue the US BRTs. And you see the extent of the corridor and the passengers per day. There's big variety, but only taking these 2 variables give us a very good explanation of the whole system. In general, every kilometer of BRT in the US and Canada moves a little bit more than 1,000 passengers per day. So as a rule of thumb, if you put a kilometer of BRT in US and Canada, you get 1,300 people a day to ride on them. Of course, there's big variety. Winnipeg is an outlier, and so is Calgary, to Canadian systems that are very far from the average. So when you compare, and I'm finishing very, very soon, when you compare technologies, is not the purpose of the talk, but I just wanted to show a graph that was prepared by Guillermo Petzol and Tony Lindau from WRI. When you compare the average operating speed and the productivity of the systems, of course, you find a higher productivity and the average and the higher speeds in metros. But when you compare with LRT, light rail transit, the trams, and BRT in big implementations of BRT, you have a bigger opportunity of having higher productivity and even higher speeds. The BRT in Istanbul, for instance, is a BRT that operates at 40 kilometers an hour commercial speed. It's really, really high. It's totally segregated. It's a very interesting system. And the system in Guangzhou has a very, very high productivity. I'm not talking about the examples in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. I concentrated on the examples in Europe and the US and Canada, but I just wanted to share this picture so you see some figures and comparison of the different systems. So the current status, we have 187 cities and counting worldwide. There's a new system that is not yet reported, that is in a new corridor in Montreal, and that was reported by Taras Gresco, the strap hanger. It's very interesting. There are these types of applications, PHLS in Europe and BRT in North America, adapted to the conditions of each city. The innovations continue, especially automation, probably low emission vehicles or zero tailpipe emission vehicles and automation are the next steps in buses. We have high performance, low cost, and rapid implementation, which is something that is very important for mayors. You can put together a corridor in very few time, 3, 4 years in our context here in Latin America, probably a little bit higher because all the things you need to comply with in US and Canada, but it's faster than many other alternatives and lower cost. The trend is going from corridors to integrated networks, and some issues on reliability, occupancy, and acceptance are still outstanding, and we need to continue promoting the high quality to get more acceptance. Because the systems, the bus systems, are usually perceived as low quality and poor systems for poor cities. And actually, I don't agree with those statements. The other problem that BRT has is that it's not an industry. It's not an ecosystem of promotion, sales, maintenance. It are very many things that are far apart from each other. So we don't have this industry promoting the BRTs and the VHLS. And we have some implementation barriers that are still difficult to overcome. When we do bus corridors, we are taking space out of cars, and that's not acceptable in many places. Actually, it's the right thing to do. And there is lack of familiarity or knowledge by decision makers and transport planners of these concepts of VHLS and BRT. And environmental consideration. Actually, the environmental considerations are gone because buses are now electric. You don't need diesel or natural gas buses anymore. You can go for electric buses. So with that, I close my presentation, Guillermo, Paula, and move to questions. Here is my email if anybody needs it. And I'm open to the conversation, Hill.
Dario, thank you. What a great presentation. You had beautiful images from all over the world. You had examples from small cities and large cities, wealthy countries, emerging countries, and you were able to show all over the impact on the decision makers, how to get the politicians from talking to actually doing, and also how to make it a complement, even the marketing of having the name, whether it's art or the Max or Transmilenio, and also how to get systems that are easily to implement and to do it fast with a lot less money and also a lot more flexibility. I think that this has been very, very useful. Also, you were able to show the capacity, how some of these BRT systems are moving more people than 90% of the subways in the world at a fraction of the cost. So I think that everyone has learned. We have a lot of food for thought. I hope that many of the people watching this video will share it with their decision makers, elected officials, city staff, community, with the media, with reporters at the universities, with students, because this, as well as other sessions, are very valuable for this, to get new knowledge and new experiences and be able to make better decisions to end up with cities that are more equitable and more sustainable. Thank you very much, and we'll see you 2 weeks from today.
Take care. Bye-bye, Dario.